Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. I have got a wonderful opportunity tonight. One of my heroes, a true warrior of truth, Ajamu Baraka, Jill Stein's vice presidential candidate and all-around activist, is joining me tonight. And without further ado, I want to bring Ajamu on. Ajamu, thank you so much for joining us here at Real Progressives. How are you tonight, sir?
Well, I'm doing better now. You know, we had a bit of a challenge because you're dealing with someone who is technologically backward, but we pushed through with your help, and so we're here tonight, and I'm looking for a very good conversation.
Excellent, excellent. So, look, I want to hear, before we go any further, for those people who have never experienced the Ajamu Baraka story, can you please talk a little bit about your background and where you came from and how you came to be who you are today?
Wow. Well, interesting enough, Stephen, I've always sort of shied away from a lot of detail about myself because, my training and my experiences have been that it's not really about the individual, it's not about the person, it's about the people, it's about the movement. But this campaign experience was one in which I had to, fill in the blanks because people were interested. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I came out of a working class family, but my family was a family that was not just working class. We were sort of what the popular term is used, part of the underclass, if you will. We were just that poor. But that experience really shaped my entire life because I had the chance to not only, experience what it meant to be a black person in the U.S., but I experienced a class reality also. And that shaped how I looked at politics, how I lived my life, how I saw the world. So I grew up in Chicago, ended up leaving and spent a couple of years in Indiana, but then I went straight into the military in 1972. I was caught up in the last part of the Vietnam draft. My lottery number, for those who might remember or might know, was 8, which meant that I was going to be drafted. So I went in voluntarily for 3 years so I could control my life and control what kind of training I got. So I went into the military. In the military, I engaged in activism. I was an organizer in the military. And once I came out of the military, I ended up went south to basically join the movement. Ended up in Florida, and then I ended up in Georgia. Had a chance to work across the South, organizing in black communities, poor communities, doing voter registration, voter education work, community organizing, and started moving toward the human rights framework. Got involved in the 80s with Amnesty International, doing anti-death penalty work and building that organization. And then went from there, ended up on the board of Amnesty. Went from there to basically found a new organization called the U.S. Human Rights Network in 2004, which was the first human rights network expressly committed to human rights violations in the U.S., bringing accountability to the U.S. and applying the human rights framework to the United States of America. And there's a lot in between there. I mean, I've worked with Black Workers for Justice. I've worked with the Southern Organizing Committee. A lot of detail, a lot of stuff that I was involved in. I was in certain political parties. But that's sort of the quick and dirty story of Ajamu. I taught. I was an educator. I taught in the schools. I've taught every grade from kindergarten through university. So,
look, I want to just say from my perspective, you are an inspiration because you are fearless in the way that you present truths that are uncomfortable. And, I live in that world now in the role that I have in a much smaller scale, obviously. But when I see you take these truths that people don't want to see, but they're truth, and I see you lay it out there for people, to me, that is the sign of a man with integrity. That is a sign of a man who is willing to lead through humility. I mean, your story just now, the way you broke that down and the way you express, you really don't want it about you. It's about the movement. I'm not building you up for a fall. I'm trying to tell you point blank that that's a rare trait. And it's something that speaks to my heart and makes me willing to listen. It makes me willing to activate. And I just want you to understand that you're a great man. And there's a lot of people out there who really look up to you. And I count myself as one of them.
I appreciate that, Stephen.
Yes, sir.
I really do.
So do me a favor. You've done an awful lot of learning throughout this campaign, obviously. I mean, this campaign had to be a difficult slog for you. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be in that spot on a third-party ticket and trying to carve out a niche to make sure people take you seriously, get you, you had a lot going against you. Talk to us about how you struggled and what you guys did to overcome some of those hurdles.
Well, it was a great adventure. I mean, it was an experience like nothing I've ever had in my life. But we were driven by a passion. We knew that we had a mission. We knew that this was a very historic moment. That there were people who were looking for a change, but there were a lot of people who were fearful of change. So it's what it said to me was, I mean, when I had a chance to meet with and talk with people across this country, I mean, the theme that kept on emerging was that there were a lot of people who were suffering, a lot of people who really wanted change, but that the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign, they were very successful in fear mongering and keeping people where they were at. While they wanted change and they supported the campaign, the ideals, our platforms was attractive. They could embrace it. It made sense to them. Stephen, when it came down to it on November the 8th, we believe that a lot of people succumbed to the fear and pulled the lever for Clinton, or maybe they didn't vote at all. But it was a very tough campaign because, we had, meager resources. We were in the crosshairs of the Clinton campaign. We had the corporate press that when they did give us some attention, it was usually to attempt to undermine us, to ridicule our campaign, to attack us. We had a few breakthroughs like the CNN town hall meeting. Yes. But, we kept on driving forward, Stephen, because, again, we had that sense of we were on a mission. It wasn't just about the campaign. It was about, building a movement. It was about getting people prepared for the kind of fight that we knew we had to wage, not just during the campaign, but after the campaign. But it was a marvelous experience. I learned a lot about this country. I learned a lot about the people, and I saw so much potential out there. I really did.
One of the things that kind of caught me off guard when you came on here, because I had never heard of you, quite frankly, and that for me, I had never really paid attention to the Green Party prior to the People's Convention in Philadelphia. And I got to meet Margaret Flowers, and I stumbled over my tongue. I was like, who, what, why should I know you? And I felt so awkward because here I am trying to learn because, I'm coming from the Democratic Party at the time, And in very short order, I came to realize you guys are serious. I mean, you've got the right sensibilities. You don't have the greatest infrastructure yet, but then again, oh my goodness, I mean, we are struggling with a duopoly here that doesn't really care about us. So how are you going to overcome that? But once I started reading up on you and following you on Twitter and, listening to your speeches and watching how you composed yourself, first of all, you're a very good and decent man. I mean, just a very kindly man. but you're also a truth teller. And I know that in a world that is as racist as our world is, in a world that is steeped in white privilege, quite frankly, when a man such as yourself goes out there and says these bold truths, it's got to be difficult. I mean, I know it's part of who you are, because I mean, I've never seen you shy away from it. Tell our audience, talk to me a little bit about what it's like to be a truth teller as an African-American man in a culture steeped in white privilege. I mean, really, talk to us about that.
Well, you know, Stephen, it's that sense of responsibility. It's connected to the sense of responsibility that Jill and I had during the campaign, committed to the Green Party. But for me, as a is that sense of responsibility to speak truth to power, to voice what others may not have an opportunity to, in fact, voice. And so, because I've been able to end up in some very interesting places, I had that sense of responsibility that it didn't make sense for me to be in these corridors of power, to be in front of the media, to be in these meetings where people were making decisions around where resources might flow. It would be an application of my responsibility to my folks, to poor people, to the oppressed, if I did not bring to the table the voice, the perspective, the experiences that I knew were contained in myself, and that I knew had to be voiced in those places. And see, and that's why I had such a harsh critique of Barack Obama, because here you had an individual who, if you read his books, and you look at his early speeches, he knew better. He knew that, you know, he had achieved the pinnacle of success, of power, and that because of that, especially when you look at the fact that without a massive response from the Black community in those key states, he could not have won. But he gets into office, and instead of developing approaches and policies and programs that could benefit everyone, you know, but specifically, you know, African Americans who were part of the working class, you know, he instead decided that he was going to align himself with the powerful. That then we have a situation where the banks are bailed out, but the people who needed to be bailed out were ignored. They were, you know, they had the theory that, you know, this would be a bad example, that folks who allowed themselves to take these loans that were basically crooked loans from the very beginning, that morally it couldn't be justified for them to be bailed out. It was absolute. It was incredible. You know, so you know you know, when we have these opportunities to bring a story, to bring a perspective, a lens, to conversations around power, around politics, around the culture, I think that we have a historic responsibility, a moral responsibility to be honest, to tell the truth, and to represent people the way they should be represented.
All right, I agree.
That's what I tried to do, Stephen. I mean, you know, I've always tried to do that, and it's been difficult because, you know, some people appreciate that, but many people don't. And so you have to walk a certain line because you want to be effective, but at the same time, you know that for many people, you make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, I support the efforts that people who take the struggle and take the hits and put the bullseye on themselves, like yourself. I support that struggle in any way I can. I mean, I'm like misting up here because this is big. You know, for me, you know, when you go out there and you say something that people haven't heard before or they're not really ready to hear, and you get the pushback and they call you horrible names, They call you an idiot. They call you a friggin' traitor. They call you the reason for Trump. They call you all these horrible things. And if you really, if you're strong and you got tough, thick skin, you can take the beatings and you can just kind of keep rolling on because you know what you're fighting for. But you're still a human being, and you still hear it, you still feel it. And how do you deal, as a man, how do you deal with the character assassinations and the false claims against you? How do you deal with that? Because you did some things in my mind that took you outside of the political system, took you outside this party, took you outside the Green Party, and made you a very, very special man, somebody I would follow in the battle. And how do you handle those attacks?
You remind yourself of where you came from. You always walk in integrity, and appreciate the people around you who know you, who love you, and they keep you strong, they keep you grounded. So, but you're right. We are all human beings. No one wants to be attacked, and you definitely don't want to be caricatured. I mean, that's the part that's the most painful, when they attempt to try to suggest that you're someone other than who you are, and that that you lack integrity, that you may have done things that were harmful to other people. Now, the good thing about the life that I tried to live, Stephen, is that even when the press was throwing this stuff at me and making these charges, it was very difficult for things to stick, because when you looked a little closer, you saw that the charges couldn't stand up. That because I've been a human rights defender all of my life, they couldn't find anybody to validate their charges. In fact, they have people who pushed back on those accusations. But it's a credible thing when you look up and you see people are writing stories about you in Time magazine and Slate and Daily Beast and Washington Post and New York Times. It's like, wow, you're in the crosshairs, and the objective is to try to undermine you morally, to undermine the campaign morally. That's why they wanted to suggest that Jill has certain positions that she didn't have. They wanted to suggest that I had certain positions. I was a black supremacist, and then I was a traitor, and I was this and that. They don't want to deal with the issues. They don't want to have those conversations. So they try to destroy the campaign and destroy the individual morally. And it's difficult, but you plow through it, because again, we both had a mission. And Jill Stein was a wonder to work with, because she's a hardworking person, and I'm a hardworking person. So we had a nice click there, if you will, and we worked pretty hard. We worked hard because we knew that we had this historic opportunity to make a breakthrough, and that's what kept us working 14 to 16 hours a day.
Right. So, I told you that I won't throw you, my goal here is, as in my mind, I'm an activist in my own right too. I don't just host a show. I have a belief. And so one of the things that I love about you and Jill and the Green New Deal is it is an end-to-end healing for our nation, for our world, really, because a lot of the things that we would do here for our energy, et cetera, impact the entire globe. It's not like the climate suddenly says, oh, well, the USA did it right. And we respect these artificial boundaries, winds and sun and everything else, water, everything that you guys put forward was beneficial for the entire planet. And, my position is from an economic standpoint. And I know that, you're not an economist, so I don't want to sit there and try and make you out to be an economist, but what I love about what you and I talked about offline was that our alignment with the issues as far as our sensibilities and what we want. You know, that the idea that Jill put forward of having an employment office instead of an unemployment office in every community,
Right.
that jives completely with the entire foundation of my economic philosophy of modern monetary theory. It aligns perfectly with the sensibilities of the poor in this country, because if you have a job guarantee, if everyone has a job, then you can have mobility. There is no more Flint can't keep you captive. You can leave.
Mhm.
They have to respond to you. They have to adjust, and they have to fix the calamity that they've brought to people's lives. And so on and on, each one of the things, the green energy, if we don't take action now, we are in deep, deep trouble. I mean, I have 9 children. Full disclosure, I have 9 kids. And so everything that I do is very selfish. It's for my children. And by extension, I hope it's good for everyone. But I want to see these things happen. I want to see student debt relief wiped off the map. However it
Right.
happens, we are not going to get in, folks. We're not going to get into the mechanics of all this, but whatever it takes to wipe out that, okay, I believe that we could do that today. As
Yeah.
far as the green energy investments, here's the thing, and I think that you'll concur. Our government has the capacity today to do the investments in those, both research and development for storage capacity for sustainable energy. They could do this stuff today. We don't have to wait 50 years, 30 years even. We could do it today. But the problem is that we are really, really steeped in a corporatocracy here. As Chris Hedges says, an inverted totalitarian state. Talk to me a little bit about how we as activists, as people who are fighting for a Green New Deal, talk to us about how we can educate the masses and speak a language that they'll appreciate. What is your best way of putting that forward?
That's a good question, and I think in the question is also the task. And the task for those of us who are part of the Green Party, who believe in the Green New Deal, it is to in fact engage in that kind of public dialogue, that kind of public education, if you will. You know, the theme of our campaign was power to the people, and I always said on the trail that this wasn't about just the November the 8th vote, that this was about building an apparatus. It was about transforming consciousness, and that process went well beyond November the 8th. So what we have to do, Stephen, we have to engage the people. We have to talk about this Green New Deal and what it implies. We have to organize community discussions, be it in our community center or in our house, at our churches. We have to, not allow for the campaign part to impact on the kind of work that we have to do. We have to continue the campaigning, if you will, and engaging in these kinds of conversations. We don't have a lot of money, resources. We're not going to be able to penetrate the corporate press and bring our messages to millions of people, but we can systematically, community by community, engage the people in this vision, because the Green New Deal and the platform of this campaign, they represented alternative values, and it represented a vision of what this society and indeed what the world could in fact be. But we've got to fight for that. We've got to fight for that, and we have to understand that the only way we can fight for that and fight for it effectively, we've got to be organized. We've got to build independent structures. And that means systematic, persistent organizing and education. So people can find the way in which they can do that. They can find the language based on their own experiences. We have the documents. You take those documents, you embrace them, you engage people, and you engage people with patience, because everybody's not going to sign on automatically. One of the tasks of an organizer is to be humble enough to engage the people, and not be concerned about the fact that, people are not going to just embrace your ideals tomorrow.
You're
It's a
helping me
process.
big time right here, by the way.
Huh?
You're helping me right now because I'm going to ask you a follow up here. Keep going.
It's a systematic process. You engage them over and over again, and through a respectful engagement, building relationships with people, um, and living your own life a certain kind of way. That is, living the principles and values you say are important. That's how we win people over to the side of the people. So yeah, we have to do it that way, Steve. We can't. There's no shortcuts. I mean, some people believe that we can convince some popular person to leave the Democratic Party, and then you build a new party around that individual, and then you win elections. It doesn't work like that. you know, Building a new formation, a formation with the kind of vision that we're talking about, with the possibility, in fact, winning, is a protracted struggle. It's a protracted process, and it has to be a bottom up process, not top down. So we have to get in our minds that basically, if we are serious about these ideals, if we really believe that we can build a new world, we've got to begin the process of, in fact, building that new world.
So I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to make a statement, and the statement's going to be slightly provocative, and you'll understand why it's difficult.
Yeah.
We have come to believe, it's not come to believe, I mean, this is years and years and years and years of research, and a lot of academics have sat there and said this and gone through it and, have gotten scoffed off, similarly to all the things that us folks on the far left and even just in general, environmentalists and so forth, we get cast to the side because it's not the orthodoxy, right? The orthodoxy of the day, whatever that is, whether it be about race, whether it be about jobs, whether it be about infrastructure, doesn't matter. Whatever the orthodoxy is, that Overton window, that's what's acceptable today. And when we start pushing that window wider and wider or moving it to the left, people start snapping. So what we've come to believe is that federal taxation serves a very important purpose. And that purpose is to drive the use of the currency, to keep the value of it up, and to be a tool to keep taxes high, to keep the economy in a certain equilibrium. But what it doesn't do is actually pay for things, because the United States is what we call monetarily sovereign. In other words, our United States government is not broke. And every time the GOP tells us we're broke, they're lying. Every time the Democrats come out and say, you got to eat your peas, we got to cut this and that and the other, they're lying. And my goal, my entire ministry is to say, God damn it, you're lying. You don't have to cut Social Security. You don't have to sit there and how are we going to pay for single payer health care? Bullshit. You can do it right now. And this is what MMT does for me. And again, I'm not here to preach MMT. I mean, I always am. But my point is that that's not really the intent. The intent is we're being lied to on so many levels. Our media lies to us.
Right.
Our politicians lie to us. There is no one, like even Bernie Sanders now, God love him, is sitting there red baiting. What the hell? I mean, these are things that after a period of time, the American public diminishes in its ability to fend off the attacks and eventually skulks back to not caring. And for me, the idea that we can do these things today, once that light bulb went off, once I realized that they were lying to me, I became an evangelical economist, because I want everyone to go out there and fight for the poor. I want everyone to fight for our environment and not accept no for an answer. I want it today. And I don't want to hear anything about 20, 30 years from now. I want it today. If you really believe that we have a climate disaster coming, if you believe we have an environmental disaster coming, then we need to take action today. If you believe that black men are being gunned down in the streets in generational poverty, which how could you not believe it? But there are people out there who deny these things. But the fact is, if you believe that, we take action today to lift the bottom up so there is no more poverty. Poverty is a political choice, and we choose to do it every day, and we got to unchoose to do it. So these are the things that drive me to do this day in and day out. And for me, I get a lot of stones thrown at me. I throw a lot of stones. How do you take an unpopular truth and really, really build some momentum behind it? Like, taking that one man in the wilderness and then just keep building and building and building and building and building? How do you do that?
We have to talk about values. We have to, talk about the future. We have to remind ourselves of our basic humanness. And we have to remind people that even though we want change and want it yesterday, that we are up against some very powerful forces who have an interest in maintaining the status quo the way it is. So, I've always been one that, we can make the analysis and talk about the structural contradictions and all of that, which are important. But the way that we make revolutionary change in this country, and we have to be committed to revolutionary change, is that we have to also project a vision of what we could be as a society. We have to talk about that, no matter how utopian it might sound to some people or unrealistic. People with a vision are the only ones that are able to really make history. And so we have to do that, especially now that, people are so demoralized in some ways because of the fact that we are facing this proto-fascist that we have in the White House. But while many people are sort of demoralized and afraid, at the same time, we see that there is a tremendous amount of activity. And the people who are involved in this new activity, who are pushing back, are people who, in fact, have that sense that, we can make change, that we can be more than what we are today. So we need to, it's the question of agency. And so engaging people and helping people to understand that, in fact, as cliche as it might sound, it really is in our hands, but we've got to convince people of that. And we've got to be prepared to engage people and engage in uncomfortable conversations. And again, be prepared to deal with people who are not going to accept, who are going to push back and struggle, because the only way that we can win is when we build effective movements. The only way we build effective movements is getting out there and, in fact, building those movements, building and creating new institutions. So we have a marvelous tool in this Green Party with this platform. This platform represents the kinds of values and values that are then translated into potential policies. We say it makes no sense that that a society does not invest in its young people, and people have to go to college and university and come out at the other end in debt. It makes no sense. So you eliminate, you invest in your people. You eliminate the need to have to borrow from the private banks. It makes no sense that people in a society where we have this fantastic medical technology, that people are still dying because they don't have access to health care. That's immoral and it's backward.
Yes.
Yes. It makes no sense that people are still walking around and don't know where they're going to lay their heads at the end of the day because they have no housing. So we've got to talk about the fact that the way this society is organized is irrational, and it only benefits a minority of the population.
Amen.
And we have to be unafraid in talking about how we are naturally social people. Therefore, we have to think in social terms. We've got to have ways of producing for ourselves that are, in fact, social, that we, in fact, put people over profits. So all of these things are contained in our platform, and we've got to have the confidence that we can use that platform to, in fact, educate people and to use it as an instrument to build an apparatus. If it's the Green Party, great. If it's something else, then that's also great. But use that platform because it's comprehensive. We deal with the environment, healthcare, with housing, with new forms and new ideas around education. We talk about real Social Security. And that's when you get old, but Social Security in which we should be able to experience right now. Why do we have to live in fear? Why Why can't we have, if we have to work, why can't we have jobs where we are able to live a dignified life? You know, well, we got to fight for all these things because we have this minority of the population that has an interest in keeping things just the way they are. And because they have the ability to ensure that their ideals are reflected in the educational process, that their ideas are reflected in the culture through entertainment, the movies, television, so that people think that our natural human nature is one of competitiveness, of individualism, of the desire for material gain and being better than other people. Those things are embedded in the culture. We've got to transform all of that. So, this is the task we have right now. This is the historic task that we have. And, people in other parts of the world are moving on this. And now people are moving in this country. Now that we've come out of this 8-year stupor, we have the possibility now of really pushing this movement forward. But we got to be unafraid of the pushback. And it will be pushback. So they're going to say that people like me and you are crazy. It can't be done.
Yes. So in talking with some of my friends from places like Australia and other areas around the world, they make the point that American exceptionalism is being pushed to their borders, where our capitalists are invading their wonderful public services like universal health care and all the things that they have. And our profiteers are invading their nations and literally destroying their safety nets in a way of finding another form of capital gain. This is so immoral. I mean, it's bad enough that they've destroyed any chance of it here with this rugged individualism that they scream about, but now they're exporting it. Now these corporatists are exporting it. I mean, yes. This cancer of neoliberalism, if people don't know what the term means, and this is it's very maddening to me because people throw that term around without really fully understanding it. But it is a very specific thing that we are experiencing right now, and it is happening in the Democratic Party as much as anything. It's not just the crazy right-wing GOP. And people try to say, well, wouldn't you rather have Hillary? And I'm like, hell no. They're the ones that kiss you while they shunt you right in the kidney. I would rather know my enemy, and my enemy I know. But these Democrats today are so corrupt, so evil. And I mean, with all due respect, I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the leaders and the power structure that guides their hand. And when I see that and I hear you're the cause of Trump because I voted third party, or you, Ajamu, are the reason why, you should have fallen in line, whatever. That is an amazing lack of clarity in what is really going on. And to me, this lack of an understanding of what neoliberalism is, if we start back there and we start understanding that neoliberalism is the privatization of everything, it is literally eroding the public purpose, and it is putting it all in the hands of corporations. And that is literally being the cancer that's spreading around the world. Talk to me a little bit about your experience as you fought through these issues. I mean, talk about some of the pushback that you've received, because this is ground zero of our struggle, I believe.
Well, the pushback comes a lot also from people who want to just look at the U.S. And not accept the fact that you can't understand the U.S. without understanding the world. That we are, in fact, living in a globalized process, a globalized economy. That what affects people in Vietnam also affects workers here, especially when you had the possibility of this TPP, for example. So because we can no longer just say America first, like the Trump folks. We have to understand that the material contradictions we see in this country are intensified fivefold in other parts of the world. That what we are experiencing now in North America and Western Europe is the consequence of the neoliberal project now impacting or coming home, if you will, and with the consequence being that You know, the drive to drive down wages, to privatize everything, to undermine the social welfare, to undermine public services and eliminate public services, the kind of things that we used to rail about back in the 1980s and 90s when these programs were being imposed in the global South, structural adjustment and those kinds of programs, they have come back to the West. So one of the things, Stephen, that we have to talk about, and this is one of those uncomfortable conversations, is that this notion that there's going to be sort of an economic recovery and that we're going to be able to live something called the American dream in the way people are imagining that is not going to happen because the American dream, the Western lifestyle in Western Europe, it came about as a consequence of relationships that meant that while we were able to live the American dream and the Western lifestyle, it came at the expense of other people. And that now that there is the shifts taking place in the world and new nations are developing and people have taken back some of the productive power that they had to give up. People are trying to maintain and control their own resources. Ability of the West to maintain the kind of privileged lifestyles that we have had here for decades is no longer possible. But no one is having that conversation, Stephen. You know, part of the frustration that many of the folks who are the Trump supporters is that they've had their lifestyles and their life prospects fundamentally changed. And they don't have any kind of theoretical framework to understand why, except that when people like Trump and others come along and say, you know, it's those Mexicans taking your jobs.
Yes.
It's those lazy black folks that, you know, causing you to have to pay high taxes so we can take care of them. It's everybody else but the system. Okay.
Amen.
And so these are the people who have experienced the consequence of neoliberalism coming home, but they have their attention has been directed toward the others. And that's so dangerous because even when we are able to make adjustments and to begin to develop more structures and relationships that are socially just, we're not going to be able to maintain this sort of lifestyle in relative terms that we had before in the past. The earth cannot sustain that, okay? So we've got to have some honest conversations about how the U.S. and the West emerged and what kinds of responsibilities do we have here in the West to the rest of humanity.
So let's talk about
because we don't have those conversations.
Let's do that here, man. Let's have that conversation because we don't have enough. You're right. And part of the problem is that we've been pushed into buying little troll dolls and little trinkets and trash that are just absolutely useless. Consumerism for the sake of consumerism, which has just blown us up beyond words. The idea that we can just do things to do them any old way we feel like doing them without any kind of moral or social or environmental responsibility is unconscionable. So while I'm not a proponent of concerning myself with endless amounts of money, because the fact of the matter is money is just a score. It's just a keep and score thing. We can fix that. That's the easy part. What we can't do is we can't reclaim the environment that we live in, and we can't keep abusing the natural resources that we have because they are finite, and we must be better stewards. So talk to me about your vision of what that tomorrow would look like. I mean, it's not a horrible vision. People see, here's the thing. People worry about what that vision looks like. And people don't understand that the value of this trinket and trash is not really where true joy and happiness comes from to begin with. I mean, I don't want to tell you, tell me what this vision looks like. Tell us what it looks like.
Well, we have to really, that's part of the conversation to talk about what that what that new world might look like. I can say that for me, that new world has to be a world in which there's not the kind of obscene inequality in income and wealth that we have today. That it is a world in which we are not going to have to be afraid every morning whether or not we're going to be able to maintain our job or we're going to lose our job. That we have to live in fear of getting sick. That we are concerned like how you are and I am, because I have 17 grandkids. I think I couldn't match you with the kids. I have 4 kids, but I have 17 grandkids, and you know I know that they are going to face some difficult times. And what's so infuriating about that is that it's so unnecessary. That if we had a new society organized in a different kind of way, we all could live decent lives. We may not have 3-story mansions and 3 cars, but why do we need that? We can have a little house like what I had, 3 bedrooms, a little front room, a kitchen. What else do I need? Why do we need more? We don't need more, but is in the interest of the corporations to make us believe that we are what we have around us materially. We are what we drive and what kind of house we live in and what kind of clothes we wear. That's who we are supposed to be. And so it's always more and more and new and new. It is irrational. It is destroying us as human beings and destroying the earth. So for me, the vision is rationality. The vision is equality. The vision is us understanding that if there's going to be production, and it has to be production, that production has to be owned by the people. That it is about putting the people first. It's about eliminating this notion of profit. It's about societies in which there is true cooperation and the recognition that we all have equal value as human beings. And what that means is that all of that is in contradiction with neoliberal capitalism.
Yes.
And we've got to say it very clearly that the enemy of progress, the enemy that is leading us to premature death, is neoliberal capitalism.
Yes. Let me interject here, because this is one of the things that I try to explain. You've been very clear, and I think this is important because I've been I'm like, hey, we should do this now. But the reality is, no matter what we do, there's a transition. There's always a transition. You can never unless you have something cataclysmic that forces a change that's beyond the societal norm, it's going to be a transition. So as we transit to wherever it is that we end up, my thinking is this. You're exactly right. So many important things don't have a profit tied to them. So many things that don't have a profit tied to them. Just serving the public purpose is not profitable. You look at pharmaceutical companies and research and development. Our government used to do research and development, and they did it for bombs and atomic energy, things like that. We could be turning that same capacity, the people, our natural resources, our gifts as a nation, as a global community. We could be turning that into things that save lives, that save the planet. We could be doing that right now. There's no reason we can't do that other than neoliberal, profiteering. And I look at it like this. Back in the day when phone service was coming out, they came up with this little 9ZR code that they would put on all the POTS lines that enabled them to take these lines to places where it wasn't profitable to do so. It's a little subsidy that allowed the phone company a little extra money that it didn't need really, but to go out there and extend it to mom, pa, grandpa over here and the farmers over there, and maybe even the areas in the inner city where people couldn't even afford to have phones. So as I look at it, the government has always, I shouldn't say they've always done it, they should have always done it, where things that aren't profitable but are necessary, Like, for example, we know that the ROI on green energy may not be in the first 15 minutes. It may take time to develop that. Who better than the government to invest in green energy now while it's not the profit center? It will be it's a very, very valuable commodity to us as human beings. Why not do that? Why is our government resistant in doing that?
Because you hit the nail on the head. The question is, whose government is it?
Amen.
Whose state is it? And as long as the government and the broader state is in the hands of capitalists, then the state will invest because they engage in research and development, but they will provide research and development support to private corporations that then develop new products that they then keep for themselves. So, we have to start looking at things like, why can't we have drugs that are clearly saving lives and making lives, easier, that are affordable or maybe even free?
Amen.
Well, because we have private pharmaceutical companies. Well, why? Why do we need private pharmaceutical companies, especially when you look at how much R&D has been provided by the state? So, why can't we have cheaper or free medical care? Why do we have these private companies that are engaged in producing this medical technology at these exorbitant prices? Do we need them? Well, yeah, Ajamu, if you're suggesting that the state takes over these companies and that undermines innovation and blah blah blah, oh, that's BS.
It is BS. Absolutely.
So the logic and the contradictions of our societies are leading us, if we're able to think about these things critically, they're leading us to question why we need these private individuals owning these critical areas of our economy.
I want to throw something at you. You don't have to have any deep understanding of what the MMT to get where I'm going with this. So one of my heroes is Stephanie Kelton, and she put out, and so did Ellis Winningham and several others. They said the best way to make the rich irrelevant is to go ahead and do it without them. Just do it. Screw them. We don't need them. And go ahead and fund these things through our government, through our natural resources, and screw the rich and just freaking make it happen. Obviously, the oligarchs have control over our situation, so there's a little bit of a war that has to occur there in some way, shape, or form. But the idea here is that we could do this stuff today. And I think that one of the most important things here, and you've said it already, and I'm going to say it slightly differently, just so you can see how aligned we are. The idea of a federal job guarantee, pegging our economy to labor, all of a sudden giving labor the say-so. If you screw with labor, you've destroyed the country. So you peg the economy to labor, and you provide a living wage. You provide Medicare for all. You provide all the things that you're talking about. You provide student debt relief. You provide free college for all and education for people to self-actualize and do things. I mean, people should be able to play the flute again. People should be able to go to school and paint a picture. It should be all for the public purpose, beauty and art, everything. And we have completely eliminated this entire huge part of our soul by focusing on the profit motive when we have the ultimate ability to deliver on these things today. And it just, I literally, when the light bulbs go off on this stuff, it really sets you ready to put your fist in the air, grab a pitchfork and a torch and go at it. Because when you realize that you're really, truly an oppressed person, when you realize your society is really turned into a serf colony, and you realize that we're just there cogs and tools for the capitalists, that should make people rise up, should it not? I mean, this should be a rally cry.
It definitely, and Stephen, and that is why I am unapologetically committed to building new societies along socialist lines.
Amen.
That's the only rational way in which we can organize an economy. It is the only way in which we can organize a culture and social institutions that allow for the full development of human beings. And we've got to begin to talk about that again. We've got to talk about the fact that, one of the reasons why we're having the issues we have right now in the U.S. and really throughout the world is that 2008 indicated that basically, if there was any doubt about the exhaustion of neoliberal capitalism, that should have answered that question. That basically, their rate of profit has not been able to recover. They basically seem to be just living on fumes right now, and that that's one of the reasons why they are driving toward war. Why is it there has to be a pivot to Asia on the part of the U.S.? These are all capitalist countries basically engaged in capitalist competition. But the U.S. is saying that basically, push come to shove, we're going to fight to maintain our economic hegemony, global hegemony. And so we've got to wake people up to that fact and not allow not one of our young people to die in wars for the 1%.
Amen.
And so that's why I think that one issue we've got to talk about before, as we start going toward the end of this, in terms of how do we bring about that new society? Because you're right, we've got to win the state. Okay, we've got to engage the state. We've got to win parts of the state in order to use that state power to make those transformative changes. So the question is, strategically, how do we do that? Well, right now we've got to build new structures. We've got to build independent political apparatuses. We've got to highlight certain critical moments that sharpen the contradictions and that help move us toward the kind of reforms we have to move toward, understanding that we're not going to end just at reforms. We're going toward transformation. Right now, we have two issues I think that we should be focusing on. I think domestically, with this issue around the Affordable Care Act and the move on the part of the Republicans to do away with it, we have a strategic question. Do we support the Affordable Care Act and align ourselves with Democrats, or do we push for improved Medicare for all? I think we push for improved Medicare for all.
I'm with
And
you.
strategically, even if there's a fallback, the fallback has to be at least a public option. If we get a public option, we'll still win, because the private insurance companies have been exposed, and more people are realizing that we don't need them.
That's right.
They are drain on the economy. They are parasites. So the fight for Medicare for all has to be one of the fights. On the international level, if you will, we've got to revive an anti-war movement.
Yes.
We have the ability now to shift attention back to the issue of war and peace. And we have to, because again, because of the fact that the U.S. is only going to be able to maintain this hegemony through military means, strategically we can cut them off. We can preempt that by building an effective anti-war movement here in this country. So those are the two main issues. Now, there's a whole host of other issues, of course, sanctuary cities and all of that. Very, very important. But we've got to talk about what are the issues strategically that we can raise up, that can under Trump's base, that can sharpen where we need to go politically as the Green Party, as people who are progressive. What are the exploit? So I think right now, care, I think is the main issue for us, at least in the short term.
I agree.
That's
with you
how we
100%.
begin to move toward.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Yeah.
I
So
hear you.
that has to take place. Building those kinds of identifying those kinds of issues and using those issues to build our organizations.
I love it. This is a great message, Ajamu. I'm going to ask you point blank. I really would love to have you back on here again. You're one of my heroes, and I'm really, I love hearing everything you have to say. Would you mind coming back sometime?
I would definitely do that. But in the meantime, I want you to make a commitment to me.
Sure.
I want you to send me some, because I told you, I caught some of your shows. And I mean, I learned a lot, but I need for you to send me some stuff to read so that when I come back, I can get down with you in this really heady stuff that you're doing right now. That I think is very, very important.
I love you so much. Oh my God, you were already superstar. Okay. Now you went to God level, man. Thank you so much, Ajamu. That means so much to me. Thank you. So folks, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to Ajamu tonight. Thank you so much for your time. Tomorrow night, we have Joe Firestone with us. And Sunday night, of course, we're back to Ellis Winningham. And we will be talking about all this stuff day in, day out. Thank you so much, Ajamu. We look forward to talking to you soon, sir.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to the next time.
You got it.